Well, hello everyone and welcome. I want to thank you for joining us today for this webinar presented by PayTrace. Uh, Today's session is automating AR and collections with embedded payments in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. It'll be a practical look at how finance teams can streamline collections, reduce DSO, and improve cash flow by embedding payments directly into their ERP. We'll be spending about 30 minutes together, including some time at the end for questions. The session's being recorded and will be available on demand after the live event. So you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording within 24 hours. As we move through this presentation, please submit any questions using the Q&A panel or the chat. We'll address as many as we can during the Q&A portion at the end. And as a reminder, please remember to stay muted during the session. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Sam Johnson, the Product Development Manager at PayTrace, who will walk us through how embedded payments can transform your AR and collections process. Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Robbie. Team, really excited to be here. Like Robbie said, my name's Sam. I wear a lot of hats at PayTrace, and I've been here for just short of a decade. Really excited to get in front of the Sabre audience and kind of tell you a little bit about some of the things that we do and really some of the challenges that we find in the payments process here today. So with that said, we're going to share my deck. I think Robbie covered everything in the intro, but I'll reiterate, if you have questions, comments, or emotional outbursts throughout this presentation, please send them our way. We love those, and we want to work through those together. So just audible confirmation, Robbie, you can see my screen okay?
Yeah, that looks fantastic. Sorry, I didn't realize I'm muted.
No, that's all good. That's why I call it the audible, because I can't see your face. All right, so let's chat about it. So today's conversation is going to be about automating AR and collections within Business Central. So one of the things that PayTrace really prides itself in is really being the experts in business-to-business payments, and a big part of that is working within the ERP ecosystem and reducing a lot of the friction when it comes to receiving your accounts receivable. So when we think about payments, a lot of the times, if you're not on like a finance team or an accountant or a controller, payments, it just kind of seems like a commodity. It exists, it's there, and it's pretty cut and dry. But in actuality, when you get into payments processes and trying to actually actualize money in the bank, it can be challenging, right? There's this whole long process and cycle post-sale that there's a lot of kind of levers and pulleys that we can play around with to make things a little bit better, not only for ourselves, right, our own business, but also for our customers and how they're paying us. So when we kind of look at kind of the traditional payments processes, I call this more of your manual paper processes for payments. There's a lot of challenges as outlined here with my 8 bullet points. I'm not going to read through these all ad nauseum, but we're going to touch on each of these a little bit. When we think about manual paper processes, right, I think of like paper checks, huge risk for human error, fraud, and especially time delays, right? We think of how long it takes people to receive an invoice, cut a check, mail a check, receive a check, process check, reconcile check. There's a lot of things that take place, and a lot of kind of touch points where things can go wrong, things can go badly. So when we have those things, you have the human error, and then you have the high days sales outstanding, which essentially means it takes a long time to get money in the bank. Other things like that is when you have a lot of different kind of ways that you're getting money in from your customers, that provides kind of nebulous visibility into your cash flow. So it's hard to be able to track and manage and make sure that everything is reconciled in the right place. Corporate goals, there might be payment disconnect with that. We just mentioned reconciliation. super time consuming, especially when you have paper checks, ACH, credit cards coming into multiple different avenues, different vendors. It can be kind of a pain to try to look at your bank statements and make sure that everything is getting in there. And then when you get into like kind of the customer conversation, nobody wants to pay by check. I've never met anybody that says, I am super excited to whip out my checkbook and pay by paper check. I'm excited sometimes to avoid some fees. I'll write a check kind of begrudgingly, but that's not going to bring your customers joy. It's not going to build trust with them. It's not going to reinforce the relationship that you've cultivated. At least the sales team has cultivated. Things like digital and online payment options, recurring billing, things that are going to make it so that they're not having to jump through a lot of hoops to give you money. Ultimately, that's going to increase vendor buyer loyalty, which is great. We're going to build some trust. And then I think probably the overarching theme of everything when it comes to embedded payments and payment processes is just efficiency, right? Efficiency all around. We want to make our staff more efficient. We want to make our buyers more efficient so that they'll just go out and continue to buy stuff with us, all that good stuff. So when you think about payments, right, we want to make that as easy as possible for everyone involved. So how do we do that? Well, I think the 3 top reasons that people should look into upgrading their payment stack, number 1 is to accelerate their cash flow. Right now, cash is extremely expensive, right? When you think about that, kind of across the board, prices are continuing to increase. The rate of inflation is super high, and the rate of lending is super high. So when things get more expensive, right, cash is key. And if you don't have liquid cash on hand, what do? Right? Well, you go out to the banks and you get a loan, right? You have to get money from somewhere, and a lot of the times they're going to have high interest. So when you think about that, if we are having to borrow against our receivables, right, everything that we sold is essentially worth less, and we're just paying the bank's money to be able to maintain that. So the quicker that we can get cash in the bank, the less that we need to borrow and the less money that we're going to have to pay, ultimately becoming more profitable, right? We want to have as much money that we can reinvest into our business as we can. That's going to lead to more growth. Customer experience is extremely important and oftentimes one of the most overlooked aspects of the payment process, because we send an invoice and we just expect them to pay. We don't want them to have any say into how that is. They just have to deal with it. And that's something that a lot of businesses are starting to realize isn't a best practice. And it's actually gaining them a competitive edge over similar businesses in their space, where when it comes to apples to apples, we're going to choose the apple that's a little easier and less friction to pay. And then lastly, visibility and collaboration. We're kind of in this kind of remote economy now. Over the last 5 years, now that work from home is kind of the standard, right? This is a great example of it. While it's great, and I think it provides a lot of benefits for employees, one of the things and disruptions it creates is lack of visibility and collaboration. It's harder to see what everybody's doing, and not from like a big brother perspective, but really from an accountability perspective, and make sure that there's nothing falling through the gaps. And when it comes to financials, that is extremely important. So we want to influence and positively impact, right, kind of teamwork and collaboration. So let's break these down, right? Let's tackle each of these. Number 1, accelerate cash flow. What are some things that we can do with embedded payments to do that? Kind of the big one is just AR automation, right? I love this infographic because it really makes manual invoicing look awful, which it is. It is the worst thing ever, in my opinion. I've outlined a 10-step process in here and what it looks like to send an invoice and receive payment. And it's really awful when you break it down into these chunks. You don't think of it when you're in the middle of it. Um, but right, step one is we make a sale, right? As a vendor, we make a sale, and that should be it, right? We should get money easily, but that's not always the right how it flows, right? You're gonna have to create an invoice. You're gonna have to mail an invoice. The postal service usually takes a few days to deliver that. And then we need to make sure it's going to the actual right person. Again, work from home. We don't know if they're at an office, if they're at their house. How long is it going to take to get to that right financial person? So that's going to be routed. Eventually, they're going to be able to cut a check. They're going to have to mail it. A couple days go by, postal service, that payment's received, and then we need to post that payment, deposit it, and then reconcile it. And that has a lot to just talk about, let alone to actually live in that process. So oftentimes, right, as according to the slide here, it takes about, what was that, 28 to 45 days, so 4 to 6 weeks. More recent data that we've gathered is that an average invoice can take upwards of 60 days to receive payment on average, which is not good, right? We don't want to wait 2 months to get paid. However, when you go digital and when you use embedded payment solutions like PayTrace provides, basically step one is customer makes purchase. Step two is PayTrace, which is essentially just delivering a digital invoice right to their inbox that they can pay instantaneously. And then you get that money in your bank, right? I'm sorry, this should also say integrated QuickBooks Online, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, because that's the focus on here. But 80% of payments are made within a week, right? And that beats the heck out of 2 months. So super easy way to implement this within the ERP system and get payment within, what is that? Probably 80% quicker. So that's one thing. However, even if you do all of the best payment automation and digital invoicing, you're still going to run into a few buyers that are slow, truant on their invoices. So one thing that we've made it really easy to do, especially within Business Central specifically, is collections automation, right? Because it's so often that somebody's not paying their in arrears on their payments, and then you got to get into tracking them down, sending them email, sending them reminders, all this stuff, and that can be a very manual process that more often than not is something that you just kind of have to develop on your own. What we've done is we've actually created our own system for that within BC so that we can, one, easily identify who hasn't paid, and two, really make it extremely simple to send them payment reminders to try to get that facilitated. So what you can see here, I'm not going to pull up my actual Sandbox account because that's just going to take way too long. But I got a couple really nice screenshots to show you. So let's just say these are our customers that we have accounts receivable for. And what's nice is that I can pull this up in BC, and I have what's called aging bands, where you can actually see kind of what state of payments are they in. So if I look at ACH customer here, it looks like they have about $5,600 that's within 1 to 30 days of sending out that invoice. So they're still good. But if you look at some of these other ones, like the School of Fine Art, right, it looks like they owe a lot. It looks like a lot of my customers, in fact, owe a lot of money here. We need to maybe get that fixed. But this will give you really good visibility into seeing, man, this is really taking a long time to get paid for these customers. Let's fix that. And on top of that, what I really like about this is that you can actually make notes in here. So whoever's working these different accounts can actually say, chasing them for weeks, emailed them on this date, and that will provide visibility into the entire organization that's using BC. So it's not siloed anymore. And then on top of that, there's also some really cool metrics that say, how much AR is currently out there, what is the average DSO and the average time to pay on this. So a lot of really good information at our disposal. From there, we can also go into some different views on these aging reports. So you can see what, how many days out, actual days outstanding instead of that range. We can look at the individual invoices within a customer. And then we can also set up payment reminders, automated payment reminders. So you can see on here within BC, I've gone ahead and said, I'm going to send out payment reminders to my customers on the day that the invoice is due, 2 days before it's due, 2 days after it's due, and 7 days after it's due. You can also get extremely customized on that. You can do 30 days after it's due. You can do all sorts of things. And there's not a cap to how many payment reminders we can generate. And what's great is that once that payment's been paid, these reminders go away. So automating AR and automating collections is really going to get money in the bank a lot quicker and create a lot less work for your accounts receivable team. Now, let's shift over from accelerated cash flow, and let's talk a little bit more about customer experience. Now, I think one of the coolest things that we've built is really a solution for AP teams to make it really nice to cater to them in what's called our client portal, the Trace AR client portal. I actually will show a demo on this one because it takes about 2 minutes. But what we've done is that when we send out these invoices, your buyers can essentially go in, pay off an invoice, but they'll also have access to this custom client portal that you can just create a URL for within BC. And pull it up here. And they can access this as their own essentially buyer portal. So if they need to ask for a copy of a previous invoice or a receipt or update all their payment methods, they're not having to contact the vendor, you directly. They can now do a lot of self-servicing, which is great. Maybe they lost that paper invoice in the mail. Could you resend me that paper invoice? It's at your fingertips now. So within this, you can see I actually have a balance of $10,000. As the buyer, I can actually just pay that off right from here. PayTrace, we have both ACH and card options, depending on what the buyer prefers. We understand that card has some higher expenses associated with it typically, and we'll talk about some different ways that we can mitigate that. But we'll pay by card. And that's done. Success. So I'll close out the invoice. That'll post it to BC. And then you can see here's the actual digital invoice and the receipt right here, letting us know it's paid. So it's going to be really nice for the buyers to be able to manage that because it's very simple. And then lastly, when we get into the visibility and collaboration conversation, we've got a lot of really good tools for that. We have an ACH journal template because a lot of the times, card and ACH, not a lot of time, pretty much all the time, they're going to be separate. They're going to come in as separate deposits. They're going to be processed separately. The time for those deposits to occur are usually at different rates. So being able to have a separate ACH journal within BC is really important so that when we do get into the reconciliation process, it's going to be really nice to be able to post all of our ACH deposits to whatever day they came in, to the card deposits on whatever day they came in. Automatic account block. What the heck does that mean? This is a tool that came out of necessity from a lot of our, not a lot of our clients, but a couple that have some bad customers. They just have those people that don't want to pay, but they want to keep doing business. Well, we're not going to do business with them until they pay us. So what we've done is we've set up different rules within BC that can be customized so that if a customer is 60 days past due, 90 days past due, you can actually set up account blocks so they cannot do any more business until they pay off their outstanding invoices, which is really nice. So we've set that up automatically. That's going to kind of create a little bit more urgency for a lot of our buyers to make sure that they get those payments in on time. And then lastly, recurring billing is really nice. A lot of the times our customers, depending on what type of business we run, we may have either installment plans set up, or maybe our way of business is kind of an as a service model where we continuously bill our customers X amount on a monthly basis. As kind of a subscription model, right? Those are really nice to have a kind of automated billing on, so that we can keep those payment information on file. We can keep ACH or cards on file and just bill them at different frequencies, right? Weekly, monthly, semi-annually, whatever that looks like. So those are actually some newer tools that we've just enabled within BC based off of customer feedback that we've been getting. And then batch reconciliation. This one's kind of a tricky one because it's, how can you automate batch reconciliation? Well, there are going to be some steps that are just always going to be there, right? Receiving payment, applying payment to an invoice, and then getting deposit in the bank. From here, what's nice is that by going with PayTrace's payment solutions within BC, we can automatically match those payment batches to statement totals. So rather than trying to look through right, all of that data, all that information, and trying to match up what payment goes to what, we're automatically syncing that to the correct batches. And then if there are any sort of adjustments, and these are things that are usually going to be like bank fees or something, they're usually small amounts, but it's, may not always be a one-to-one reconciliation. We can also automatically create exclusions or adjustment entries into BC so that everything adds up at the end of the day, rather than trying to do a bunch of research and trying to figure out what discrepancies are and then create different line items for that. So again, we're trying to make that process smooth from sale to deposit. Now, a couple other things that I wanted to note really quick that I think separates PayTrace from a lot of the other payment solutions, because if you've gone to any of these, Microsoft community events or trade shows or things like that, you can throw a rock and you'll hit an AR company. What's great about PayTrace outside of all that stuff is, we've been doing this for 20 years. And one of the things that we've really hung our hat on is what's called interchange optimization. So I've mentioned before, card can be expensive, right? If you're accepting credit cards as kind of a primary method of payment acceptance, it's extremely convenient, but it's also costly, right? Because when we accept credit cards, we're essentially subsidizing all of the rebates and rewards that our buyers are getting from that. And oftentimes it can be anywhere from 2 to 4% in credit card fees. Well, not all cards are created equal. And in fact, on those B2B cards, specifically, purchasing corporate and business cards, there are lower rates that you can achieve through additional data entry. So what's nice is that you can actually send in line item detail and summary information to, in this example, Visa, to qualify for a better rate. Now, typically, that's about 20 extra fields of information that needs to be submitted for every single transaction, which isn't super scalable. What PayTrace has done is we've actually automated this process so that we're able to take all of the invoice data that we get from your transactions and just submit that to the card brands so that they'll take it. And instead of having to pay, 3.15% on a transaction, we can get that down to 1.75, right? For people that are in finance, 135 basis points, 1.35% is massive. If you're adding that back to your margins on a lot of sales that are already operating on very thin margins, this is creating real profitability. This is adding tons of value back into the organization. So not only can we expedite payments, but we can actually make the cost of accepting payments cheaper. So, oftentimes a business will come to us that wasn't doing this, what we call interchange optimization, work with us, and it's pretty common for us to be able to save them tens of thousands of dollars annually on fees, right? That's money back in your pockets. And then on top of that, PayTrace as a solution, I realize I haven't talked much about our organization, right? We've been doing this for a long time. We really focus on the B2B payments process. Oftentimes when you work with different payments providers, there's a lot of people that are involved. You have your merchant services, you have your gateways, you have your ACH provider, you might have an ISV that's managing your actual integration into BC. So you might have 5 or 6 different parties that are trying to help make payment processing for your business. With PayTrace, we're one throat to choke. We're kind of that all-in-one payment tech stack where we do the merchant services. We own all of the technology. We own the actual integration. We do the AR, right? All of that's within one system, one place. So one team to bill you, one team that if you have questions, you know who to contact. We're not going to point the finger and try to get you over to somebody else, right? We're going to work with your VAR. We're going to work with Sabre to make sure that you're set up properly. But once you're up, it's simple. And with that said, I post this up here just to create a little bit more credibility. You may not know who we are. We're not necessarily a household name, but we work with 40,000 different businesses today. We process and settle over $50 billion in volume on our platform across $65 million transactions. So we've got a lot of large organizations that trust us, that have been using us for years. Some of these you may recognize. And when we work across a lot of different industries, and these are some of our larger ones, but we've run into some really interesting types of businesses that I didn't even know existed. So if you're one of those, we'd love to have that conversation. And then of course, right, just kind of connecting all the dots. Things that we really help you with is getting paid quicker, being more efficient, right, freeing up personnel time, focusing more on the strategic instead of the tactical. Greater visibility, higher payment security. That's something I haven't even mentioned is payment security, right? We don't have data breaches. I literally just got an email for a class action lawsuit against a previous insurer of mine that had a breach, right? We don't have that. Everything that we do is encrypted, tokenized, 100% PCI compliant. And then we're going to save money and provide amazing support. So all that together, provides a really good solution for your payments. And then I love this quote. We just got this from one of our large merchants. Just PayTrace just works. It's been effortless, best support in the industry. So with that said, we've got a lot of resources, a lot of follow-up. If you want to learn a little bit more, feel free to check out some of these links. I'm happy to share this with you. If you'd like to get in contact with our team directly, I forget if I put our contact information on here. I did not. Sales@paytrace.com is the easiest way, or you can reach out to the Sabre team and be more than happy, hopefully, to point you in our direction, and we can have some conversations. So I think I'm right on time, maybe a little bit late. Robbie, if you want to take it over.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for the insight, Sam. Yeah, I'd love to open it up for questions. If anybody has any, feel free to unmute yourselves. And we'll see. If not, I do have a few that have come in as well.
Nice.
All right, so nobody's asking any questions yet. So my first one for you, Sam, would be, what is the typical implementation timeline with PayTrace?
Honestly, it's really quick. When I think about kind of the early days of ERP integration, it used to be so custom, and we'd have back and forth consultation calls. It could take months. Typically for BC, we can get you up and running within a week. There's kind of like a documentation process, of course, with payments, but for the most part, we can get you set up really quickly.
Beautiful. So for the next question, how is customer support managed and by who?
Support's all in-house. Yeah, great question. So I actually started off on PayTrace's support team when I first came into the organization. So I'm a little biased, but we really do have the best support in this space. Everything is US based. We're not doing chatbots or AI or anything like that. And it's actual people that live. We're US based, so most of us are in the Pacific Northwest. But when you call a phone number, a live person picks up within 20 seconds or less. Same with email, right? It's really kind of that personal touch.
Amazing. I love that. And the final question that I have here is what's next on the product roadmap for Trace AR for Business Central?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm at liberty to discuss that. No, honestly, it's kind of some of those things that I mentioned before when I talked about some of those new insights that we're working on. We spent a lot of time on our collections manager. That's been a really big one. We've been at a lot of the shows, Community Summit, Dynamics Con, Directions, which we'll be at again here coming up, and getting feedback from a lot of our partners and customers on that. So we just kind of worked through that. So to be honest, we'll see what's going to come up next. We are working in a few other ERPs. Acumatica has been a big one as well for us. So we're putting in a little bit more development effort into that as well.
Amazing. Well, if that's all the questions that I have for today, I'd like to thank everybody for attending the webinar, and I'd also like to give a big thanks to Sam for presenting for us today. I hope everyone was able to learn something, and I hope you all have a great day.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Robbie.